Hello and welcome back to another episode of Director Spotlight. I am your host and festival director, Rebecca Erb, and I am super lucky today to chat with the award-winning filmmaker and writer and director of I Am Vengeance Retaliation. Please welcome Ross Voyask.
You may be the first person who's ever said my name correctly.
Because as I was approaching your name, I'm like, oh no, I forgot to ask how to properly pronounce his name. So that just made my day.
As you were saying it, I thought, how's this going to go? Sorry.
No, that's great. So I did say it correctly. Oh, perfect. Beautiful. The planets aligned for me today. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's very sunny in East London, where I'm based. The weather seems to be getting better, and we are slowly coming out of lockdown, which is really a relief to someone like me who seems to thrive on human interaction. So, that's things are looking optimistic.
Good. I'm very, very, very happy to hear that. Very happy. Thank you for, taking the time to chat with me. I'm super excited. So my favorite question, and always my first question, when did the passion for storytelling and filmmaking and action begin for you?
How long have you got? When I always say it like, when I was 3 years old, and I'm in my 40s now for anyone who doesn't know, when I was 3 years old, all I could think about was working for, I didn't know the difference at the time. All I could think about was working for Marvel or DC Comics. I started reading when I was like 2, for real. Like I mostly read Marvel comics and DC comics. As a child, I obviously didn't know the difference between the companies. I just loved Thor and Daredevil and Superman and Spider-Man and Batman and the Creeper and Ambush Bug and all these other things. So I basically at school just drew continuously in the margins of my, I guess they're called exercise books. So just again and again and again. Maths, whatever, English, I don't care. Spider-Man, etc. So that was the situation for me until I was 11. And when I was 11, in one day, I saw 3 movies that totally changed my life. And if you ask filmmakers what movies inspired them, or like you say, ignited the passion, you tend to hear things like Jaws or Indiana Jones or, I don't know, Goodfellas or Mean Streets, but, all those movies. For me, it was Revenge of the Ninja, Commando, and American Ninja. And the connection's probably fairly obvious. Ninjas are kind of like superheroes, at least to my 11-year-old brain. There's loads of fight scenes and gadgets and costumes. Let's face it, Arnold in Commando is kind of a cartoon. And I mean that in the best way. So when I was 11 and I saw those movies in one day, my brain just went, how do I do that? I didn't even know what was involved in making films. So that's kind of where it started. And the short version beyond that is a friend of mine's father had a camcorder. Some friends and myself started filming fight scenes, essentially, because that was the bit that made us excited. And from then on, we sort of developed our, if you could call it, craft. We developed it from there. And I pursued it more seriously as a student, taking film studies and so forth.
I absolutely love that. I love when the story is like, well, when I was like 5 or 3, and then comes that you just like followed your childhood dreams and here you are doing the thing after all this time. And I just find that just so inspiring and beautiful. And this is great. And you are just very well known and respected in the film festival circuit, just for all the relationships that you've been able to build. And I mean, obviously for your just vast knowledge and talent in filmmaking. 10 Dead Men sold over 40,000 copies, like in the UK alone. That is absolutely amazing. And I have to say that I'm definitely your target audience for your film Warrior S. I mean, female fighters, a ritual duel, post-apocalyptic world. That sounds absolutely amazing.
It was very much kind of almost like a Roger Corman type movie. And I mean that in the best way. Cecily Faye, who was the star writer, producer, songwriter, created the costumes, built the sets, like fight choreographer. She's amazing and a real talent. And it was kind of like a combination of her vision and my almost like practicalities as a filmmaker, for the better way of saying it. Like the original cut would have been like 4 hours long if we'd done everything we wanted to. I mean, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
But it was genuinely, so many people helped us on that movie. Like Joey Anser came in and choreographed, and we had amazing stunt people like Helen Bailey, who's gone on to become a very successful stunt person, and lots of other people. And it really was a labor of passion and love, because a lot of people came together at any one time just to create things. I mean, we filmed a horse chase, and we built a village, and all sorts of crazy stuff, which in the UK, particularly for genre filmmakers, it doesn't really happen. So, I mean, Cecily's a real force to be reckoned with, like with passion and drive, and hugely talented musician as well. She created the score and everything. Wow. So it was a real pleasure to be part of it. It was a hell of a, a process to go through.
Oh, I'm sure. And you also directed Dead Man Walking, which super small world this filmmaker world is. We had the pleasure of talking to Brian Larkin last year on our director spotlight.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I was really privileged for Brian invited me along. Obviously, I worked with Brian, for anyone else doesn't know, on the first Vengeance movie, which is known as Vengeance or I Am Vengeance, depending where you are in the world. And he was fantastic as one of the lead villains. And we've become a real set of collaborators since. He's always been very giving of his time with me. He's very, I'm sure creative and passionate and talented. So to be asked to come in and essentially direct a chapter in this short film franchise, which is hugely ambitious for anyone who hasn't seen it. We've shot all around the world. But what I liked particularly about the third part is, as much as my oeuvre is essentially action, what I like about the third part, and again, this will hopefully get more exposure soon because festivals have unfortunately been sorely lacking in the last year. It's more of an espionage movie. There is action in it. There is some action sequences in it, but it's much more about the tension and the espionage aspects of it, and kind of a twisty turny thriller rather than just essentially having the beat 'em up and shoot 'em out aspects, which maybe I'm a bit better known for. So it was a really great challenge for me, and I really loved sort of spreading my wings a bit, particularly in collaboration with Brian.
That's amazing. That's one of the many reasons that I love filmmaking, is just the collaborations that you get to do and the connections that you get to make, because it's really all about the connections and working with like-minded people that want to, really bring an amazing story to life. And I really, really respect that. And I really respect I Am Vengeance Retaliation. It is so fun. It is beautifully shot. I mean, all of the action is shot in these great wides, and we actually get to see the action, the fight go down, aside from cutting away from that. So I really, really appreciate that. I mean, every frame is really well balanced and full, and composition is obviously understood, and it pays off super well. And not to mention the villains, when the villains come in and they're all lined up, is so fun. And they're just so colorful in their looks and their personalities. And I appreciate that in your writing, because a good villains go a long way. Could you tell us a little bit about your writing process and bringing this story to life?
Sure, thank you. Well, I mean, it's funny that you mention the villains, because if this wasn't so much in the writing of it, but I very much spoke with our costume designer, Emily, who's fantastic. I said, I want the villains to look like action figures. I want them to look almost like G.I. Joe figures, to have their own looks. And obviously it helps that they already have their own looks as people. But I really imagined being able to go into a toy store and being able to buy, the henchmen from the Vengeance movies, as well as the heroes as well, right? In terms of the writing process, I guess it's kind of interesting in that, again, for people who don't know, it's a sequel. You don't need to have seen the first movie to enjoy it, I hope, because that was the plan. But the first and foremost thing in our minds, myself and the producers, John Adams and Diane Shorthouse, the first thing in our minds were, we obviously want to connect it to the first movie, but it was really important to make sure you didn't need to have seen it. So that informs some of the writing. That's why there's only a couple of characters, including the main character, of course, in the sequel. So that's one thing. And then the other aspect, if you like, in terms of the villains, was for the lead villain, we really had to have someone who could be a really good foil, an effective foil against Stu Bennett playing John Gold, because he's a unit. He's massive. He's very charismatic and also very charming, very funny, but obviously a killing machine as well. So we needed someone who could really match that. And in the writing, I kind of wrote Teague to be this, I guess, like a counterpart to that, right? So quite venomous and quite full on and very intense. He's also a traitor previously to the team. And then when we cast Vinny, which was a real coup, like getting Vinny Jones to play the lead villain was a real coup. And of course, the way I'd initially written the character didn't necessarily match what you would expect from Vinny Jones. So we did some adapting of that, and I had a very long conversation with Vinny before we started shooting to talk about how we might adapt that for the character and so forth. And that was really rewarding. So the writing process itself kind of evolved through the movie in some ways. We would very much break down each scene, go through it for each character, and then kind of go from there. So the writing process itself was almost mechanical initially, because it was about what are we going to take over from the first movie, and then how do we make this sequel kind of a bigger and better action movie. So we kind of came up with the idea of a chase movie, essentially. And then it came down to kind of the background between Stu's character and Vinny's character. That was key. I hope that makes sense. I hope that answered what you were looking for.
It absolutely does. Absolutely. And speaking of Vinny Jones, I mean, he's a classic action guy. I mean, he's so great, and he's always been one of my favorites. Could you tell us a little bit more about how it was working with him and the process of building that character a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Working with Vinny was really interesting because, look, this was kind of like his 100th movie or thereabouts. That's like he was saying. And when you look at his IMDb credits, yeah. Not by personally counting each one. But what I found fascinating about working with him was we would run the scene. There's obviously never enough time, but we'd run the scene between us, like as the actors and the director. We'd then bring in the key crew, like the sound department, obviously the DOP, Simon Rowling and his team, who were amazing, obviously. And we would kind of we'd run it for them. And then we would go. And one of the things I found most interesting about that, and obviously via that, we would kind of break down how we were going to cover the scene, how we would shoot it and get the best sound and everything else. And what I found most interesting about working with Vinny as a sort of director who's essentially trying to build and develop and so forth, working with actors and all of that, was we do the first take, which was absolutely fine. There was the occasional fluff here and there from everyone, but overall, it would normally be fine. And then, of course, we do a second take. And what I found most interesting about the second take was then he had clearly been listening and paying attention to everything going on around him, and he would essentially deliver, I guess, an adjustment, whether it was paying more attention to a particular character in the scene, or just adjusting his delivery, or whatever it was. There would be a noticeable difference between take one and take two. And by the way, this doesn't just go for him. Everyone obviously built on what they had done, but just talking about Vinny himself.
Yeah.
And that was always it was significantly noticeable what he would change, at least from my perspective. And then if we were to do a third take, which, we'd do 50-50, depending on how much time we had, there would also, again, be another adjustment. So what I liked most about working with him was that he really was, this may sound obvious, but he really was taking in what was going on around him and making adjustments and delivering maybe a slightly different take, which would give me some different options to the editor as well. So it's really helpful to have that. So I just found it really rewarding to watch for work. I guess that makes it. I hope that doesn't sound too cliched, but it was really interesting, and particularly given his his nature and how famous he is and all of that stuff and his experience. I really feel I benefited from that. And in fact, actually, as we went through the movie, how he was delivering his performance affected in some ways how we would break down what we were doing. Like, would we sort of pare the dialogue down more? Like, he very much did prefer to be a man of, I don't want to say few words, because you can see he makes jokes and he quips and everything in the movie, but it was kind of about boiling down the scene to its essence and then building it back up from there, which I as a director, I found really rewarding. And as a writer, actually, because it helped me develop, how, I guess as a writer, it helped me develop how performances can affect what you then feel. I hope that's making some sort of sense. Like, a film evolves as you're making it. Like if you just stuck to the letter of a script every time, that may well work, and I'm sure there are some directors who do that. But because I'm the writer, the director, and the editor, I was always kind of getting new ideas out of what we were doing. And by the way, that goes for the fight scenes. That goes for the work from Tim Mann. That goes for the work, dare I say, the production designer, Paul Burns and his team, and all of the other people contributing. It kind of has an effect on how we worked each day moving forward. The actors, all of the actors, gave me stuff I could never ask for as a director. So, at least in my opinion, that kind of helps elevate the movie, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, teamwork makes the dream work, and definitely translates well for I Am Vengeance Retaliation. And, you know, speaking of stunts and everything, am I correct in saying that everyone did their own stunts and did their fight choreography?
The only person who didn't was Vinny.
Okay.
Vinny, every time you see Vinny, it's him doing it, obviously. And he did a certain amount for every sequence. We had an amazing stunt double called Aaron Street, who was brought in by the stunt guys, Dominic Kinnaird and Dan Stiles. And he made a really effective double for Vinny. In fact, I challenge most people, unless you're watching it frame by frame, to actually tell us, given the doubling. And I think he did a great job. And but with Vinny, when he's on screen fighting, he absolutely, I call it, he throws with intent. Like when he throws a punch, it looks like he's trying to kill you, you know?
Yeah.
It's great. You know, you can't ask for more than that. And he just needed to watch it once. You know, Aaron and Tim or whoever would be involved would obviously show him what's required. He'd step in, nail it, move on, which was great. You know, you don't have a lot of time when we're doing what we're doing. So the fact that he could take the choreo so quickly and deliver so effectively straight away was obviously very beneficial. But everybody else did absolutely everything.
That is so impressive. They just blew me away. It was so well done. And how much practice did that take? Like how much time was allotted to go through that?
There was nearly no time. I mean, as in we're filming every day.
Yeah.
Tim would grab. So Tim Mann, who is incredible to work with. We had I don't remember exactly. I think we had a few weeks prep. Yeah, we had a little bit of time, but not a lot of time. And Tim, in the time before coming to the shoot, because obviously he was working on something else beforehand, managed to get some time with his previous team. So he was able to put down on tape, or it's not even tape anymore, is it? He was able to film his previous team doing quite a bit of the choreo for most of the sequences. There were a few sequences he just didn't have time to do, so he had to sort of do them on the spot. But that really helped. So obviously it helped Simon and DOP to see what we're trying to achieve. I would obviously, give my own opinions as well. But then what Tim would do here and there each shoot day is essentially steal people when they were available and run them through the choreo as much as he could. So everyone had a bit of prep. I'm sure they'd all tell you they probably didn't have enough time. There's never enough time. But he's so good at what he does, and the actors were so fully committed. But I think it comes across really well. Like, I don't think anything is lacking on screen for that. I'd love to have had more prep time, of course, But that was really the process. And then obviously we'd run it through, break down each sequence, nail the choreo, move on. That was essentially it. We tried to allot enough time. Again, there's never enough time. And cover it as best we could. And everybody on the action side of things just, how could I ask for more? It's quite extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, because I would have never guessed that, there wasn't as much time as you would have wanted, because it looks like, I mean, not only is it natural and doesn't look like it's like too practiced, but it just looks just so well. And I feel like, in a lot of actions, especially like independent actions, when you don't have enough time to practice that, then you have to rely on the editing to, hide that. Which you didn't have to rely on that. You still showed all of the action, which is so impressive.
Yeah, I find it's very difficult for me with action films these days. I feel like I've been spoiled by the 80s and 90s. There are still some great films out there today that do it well. Like, have you seen Nobody yet? I mean, my God, like it's incredible. There are still films that do it, but I find it very difficult to deal with movies where the camera is just here during a fight scene. Drives me bananas. Okay. I think there are moments where it's warranted, like you get the emotion and so forth.
Yeah.
but to actually show the choreo, like the work, like why would you bring in an amazing fight choreographer if you're going to see this elbow for a moment? And I've never understood that with no commitment to anybody. Like I feel like the Paul Greengrass films kind of did action films in for a while. I feel terrible saying something like that because he's super talented, but I just I find those kind of movies very difficult to process in terms of the action.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, filmmaking, we love doing this. We love what we do. It's a blast. But action, I feel like, holds a special kind of excitement and probably a special kind of headache. That's for sure. But, if you had to choose to this date, what would be your favorite action movie that you have created? Top favorite.
My own movie.
Yep.
Oh, I can't. That's an awful thing to ask someone. I'm really proud of all the work that everyone's put into my movie, and I hope I'm growing. I think I'd be better off telling you about things I like in my movies rather than saying my favorite movie. I think that'd be really difficult.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, in many ways, the favorite thing I've ever done is actually Dead End 3, so I can't wait people to see it just because it is different and it's got action in it, but it's not you know what I mean? Like, so I'm really proud of all of that. I mean, if we're talking about the action content, then I guess I have to say I Am Vengeance Retaliation, because the people we had on that movie and the end result, I mean, it's really hard to be objective. I just see the things I'd like to change and all of that. But for the intensity of it and hopefully the roller coaster of that movie, like there's like 19 fight scenes in 82 minutes. So hopefully it delivers. But I have super fond memories of film. Like in many ways, I prefer the process. Like I love to think about the process of making the films. The times that I've shared with cast and crew, like I very much miss the cast and crew. But for me, I had moments on things like my first feature, Left 4 Dead, where we created these insane epic fight scenes, on zero money, quite bluntly, just literally passion and creativity of everyone involved. And I have really fond memories of creating the movie, but particularly some of the fight scenes. 10 Dead Men, working with a stunt man, I should say, extraordinaire, Jude Poyer, who's gone on to incredible things like Gangs of London. The stuff he brought to action with us, like he's a storyteller. He's not just a stunt coordinator, with no disrespect meant to any stunt coordinators, but Jude is a storyteller, a filmmaker. So the stuff he brings when he choreographs action, it's story and character. It's not just this guy gets hit in the face and this guy falls down the stairs. So I have very fond memories of that process, and I'd love to work with him again. And dare I say, every movie, Warrior S, the craziness of working with Cecily and shooting in a place called Guernsey, off the coast of England, which is beautiful, and some wild fight scenes in that one. And dare I say, the First Vengeance, working with Stu Bennett and the whole crew and cast, in fact, but working with someone so experienced as Stu, and Gary Daniels, of course, martial arts star extraordinaire. So I've been really privileged along the way to work with these people. So it's really hard for me to answer, like, what's my favorite film? I've just been really lucky along the way, or fortunate along the way, to work with all of these people who have essentially elevated the work I've been doing.
I absolutely love that. I mean, just hearing passionate creatives talk about the craft, and then even like not, enjoying the process and not being able to pin down on your favorite project is just so fun to hear and just so fulfilling, because this is just, you can just tell that you are super passionate and not only talented, but super passionate about the craft. And I love that. So, but maybe this would be an easier question. What is your, just in general, anything out there, favorite action movie?
Oh my God. How long do you have? If I have to pick one, if I really have to pick one, I think the best one, the two best action films ever made, is Hard Boiled, because I don't think anyone's beat Hard Boiled. John Woo hasn't even beat Hard Boiled. And it's just an extraordinary action picture. And in terms of Western movies, I guess it's Die Hard, really. I don't think you can beat Die Hard. But if I've got to talk about my favorite as opposed to best, I think Commando, like every time I decide to watch Commando, which is about 3 or 4 times a week, it's the right decision. Like every moment of Commando, from the beginning to the end, for better or worse, all of the fluffs and bloopers and everything else you want to, all the things where you see stuntmen flying through the air and you see the springboards at the bottom of the frame and all the continuity errors and everything. Like Arnold carrying a tree over his shoulder is how we meet him. But every moment of that, and it might be because it hit my brain when I was 11. It might be the Steel Drums by James Horner. It might be all of those things. It might be Vernon Wells as one of the best evil villains of all time in Bennett. It's probably my favorite. I probably have to say Commando because I've seen it probably 200 times now. It's not a joke. It's probably 200 times.
I love that. I love that because there's a huge difference between like your favorite and then what you deem as like your favorite out of like the best. And there's just those nostalgic films that you just hold dear because it just has so much of part of the reason that you are where you are today.
Yeah. I mean, the one that started it, if we go right back, is Revenge of the Ninja, which was the first of the 3 movies. And it just blew my mind. And there's so many things about it that you can kind of point at and laugh at, I guess, these days. But for the right reasons. Like, I just find it fully enjoyable. It's a canon movie, and canon movies have a lot to answer for my career. And, there's an awful lot of stuff out there in the canon movies where you kind of go, you can't do that, really, politically speaking. But it was still the one that kind of like made my brain explode, and the fights were really savage and really creative, and and all of that. So that's the very first one.
It's amazing. So you are the creative director at Evolutionary Films. So you're, head of acquisitions and, developing a slate of genre feature projects. That's amazing. Could you tell us a little bit more about your role at Evolutionary Films and maybe give us a little sneak peek at this slate or a few projects that you're working on?
I can try. Evolutionary Films itself was formed, where are we? I think we're in our 6th year now, which is pretty amazing. My business partners are, again, John Adams and Diane Shorthouse, who produced Vengeance Films, of course. We all came from production. So we all came from making movies anyway. And then we had some experience in sales and distribution, having worked with various different companies. And so we kind of came together essentially under the remit of making movies and then, of course, selling and distributing them. That were very audience friendly, or like, dare I say, commercial or genre, if you want. You can sort of pinpoint it however you want to. So that's kind of how it started. And then what happened was, one of the first things that happened when we formed the company was that a fairly well-known filmmaker and actor in the UK came to us and said, "I've got a movie where there's a few territories left. Would you like to try and sell them for us?" And we were like, "Oh yeah, we're set up to make and sell our own movies. So of course we could try and sell other people's movies." And that's kind of how it started. I mean, we always had that intention, I guess, but the idea that as soon as someone found out we were doing what we were doing, they came straight to us was really, very encouraging. And then we acquired some movies like 1 Million Clicks, the great Mike Muller German martial arts movie. Anyone who hasn't seen it, it's so much fun. Mike Muller is the German Jackie Chan. This was through a guy called Mike Leader, who you may or may not have heard of, who does a lot of stuff in Hong Kong. Very good friend, produces, acts, does everything around movies in Hong Kong and wider in Asia. Does a lot of casting and so forth. Very long-term friend. And he's actually recommended films subsequently, which is fantastic. And it kind of built from there, essentially. We went to our first film market, which was Berlin at the time. And we just kind of grew from there. We finally were able to raise the money we needed to make the movies. Small and growing. And it's really been persisting at it. John and Diane have built up amazing relationships with international buyers and distributors. And, we have a network of our own people here in terms of cast and crew and everything else. So it's essentially been a 6-year journey. And before that, us guys, doing our own things anyway. So it's been this great collaboration. And of course, we have other staff now who are all amazing, like technical people and salespeople and everything. And it's, we're kind of the little UK company, but could, I hope.
That's amazing. Congratulations on the 6 years. That's a big feat. That's for sure. Yeah. So what are you working on? Do you have a project for 2022 or something that you're working on?
Well, I'm hoping maybe this year, but I guess it depends on how things proceed. We're hoping to be doing my first threequel, I hope, which would be in the shape of Vengeance 3. But let's see, because it's very early stages. I've just delivered the script. We're working on a fantastic animated project as well, a much bigger animated movie, which I can't really talk about at the moment, but it's a kind of family-friendly animated movie, which is really exciting. And a few other bits and pieces, here and there. We get involved in packaging other movies, mostly genre, and we have more movies coming out, but I don't know if there's anything I can announce right now in terms of when and where, because obviously things are just sort of getting going again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the little inside on what you're working on. How does it feel to be potentially working on now, like this trilogy?
It's definitely strange. Strange is the wrong word. Maybe unexpected, I guess. Like with the first movie, we knew there might be some possibilities for a franchise, just the character, and he's like essentially the first movie, he's like a British Punisher, really, right? And then with the second movie, we kind of grew it and we built the team and all of that. So we understood that there would be possibilities, particularly working with our North American distributor, Saban, who have been amazing on both movies. So I guess there's a real promise for the future of the franchise, I guess, which as an independent filmmaker working out of the UK is kind of novel. I don't know how many people in my position get to do this. So that's exciting. Writing my first threequel has been an interesting situation because, again, one feels the need to change things up, perhaps give John Gold, without getting too complicated right now, give John Gold a bit more of an inner life, a bit more of outside of the killing machine aspect of who he is. So there's some of that. There's some twisty turning points, and the basic pitch for it is it's sort of the Dirty Dozen meets the Magnificent Seven, kind of, in a more contemporary setting. So it's been quite a process. Sort of one of the main aims has kind of been to combine aspects from the first movie and the second movie into this new version, which again leads on from the second one. But again, you shouldn't necessarily need to have watched the first two movies to enjoy it. So as a process, it's been kind of interesting writing three individual movies that do connect, but it's not relying on you having seen them to understand what's happening. So I don't know how many trilogies have done that before, or sequels or threequels.
Exactly. I feel like not only there's a little bit of that. Yeah. Sorry about that. All of a sudden, but I mean that is so much to finagling around and the story writing, because it's one thing having like this full story through and have all these points, but then to make a point to each one can stand on its own and enjoy on its own without seeing the other ones. I mean, that has to be, difficult, in the writing sense and being able to, really still bring everything together and make the characters what they want. But again, like, I respect you for doing that. Like, applause to you, man. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Absolutely amazing.
The thing that's helped, obviously, in the writing of the threequel, if we're going to call it that, is I obviously do have the voices of key characters from the second movie, obviously including Stu Bennett as Gold. I do have those voices in my head somewhat because of the performances in the second movie, because there's a number of people who track through. Let's see how we get to when we finally make the movie. But there are a number of characters that do progress on. So that's been very useful in terms of knowing those actors and knowing how they perform. That has helped inform how I write the characters. That's definitely been helpful. The structural aspect of it is, without putting anything down, there's a formula to action, I think. I think you can break the formula, but there is somewhat of a formula to, dare I say, bigger and better action and structure to like the mission they go on and set pieces. So once you have that, it's then about how those characters inform the story, like how the characters inform the action and how the action leads the story and vice versa and stuff. So while it absolutely has challenges, one of the things that I found comforting in some ways is kind of having those voices and the way they perform of those actors in my head. That really has actually helped.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm so very excited and honored to be able to show everybody your hard work Saturday, May 1st at Midwest Action Fest. Just thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. So, yeah, again, you can watch I Am Vengeance Retaliation at Midwest Action Fest at Merrimack Cinemas in Logansport, Indiana, in house and virtual. So, if you haven't gotten your vaccines yet and you're still, staying in home, don't worry. You can go to MidwestActionFest.com to get your virtual ticket. Or if you are vaccinated and you want to go and venture out and all that good stuff, come and hang out at Merrimack's. You can also get your in-house tickets. There'll be panels, films, vendors, and of course, I Am Vengeance Retaliation. So thank you guys so much for joining us, Ross and I, for Director Spotlight. And this is week of the big event, so the countdown begins. So I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday. Remember to drink water, take your vitamins, text your mom, don't text and drive, all of the good things. Be a decent, kind human being, and remember to smile. So, again, next week, Midwest Action Fest. So, yeah, hope to see you there. Bye, guys.
That's great.